The entire room fell into a heavy, uncomfortable hush when the young woman calmly pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down in the seat that everyone understood belonged to the wife. She wore a smile as if she had every right to occupy that spot, while the wife stood just a few feet away, a folded napkin trembling in her hands. Her husband remained silent. His mother looked away, unable to meet her gaze. But then an elderly woman at the far end of the table slowly pushed herself to her feet, and the words she shouted next seemed to freeze every person in the mansion where they stood. Before we go further, if you believe that kindness, loyalty, and second chances can truly transform a person's life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this story, and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to keep bringing emotional narratives like this one directly to you. For 6 full years, Elena had held the belief that marriage meant standing beside someone through every storm life threw at them. She had married Daniel when neither of them had very much at all. They rented a tiny apartment, shared one old car between them, and celebrated their first anniversary with a home-cooked dinner because they simply could not afford a restaurant. Elena never complained, not once. When Daniel launched his company, she worked late into the night at home, helping him organize invoices, answering emails, and offering encouragement whenever investors rejected his ideas. Slowly but surely, everything began to shift. His company found success, their modest apartment gave way to a sprawling mansion, and the simple man Elena had married became a wealthy businessman whose name appeared regularly in newspapers. But as Daniel's bank account expanded, the distance between him and his wife expanded even faster. At first, Elena attributed it to the pressure of his work. Then came the late nights, the unexplained meetings, and the constant excuses. Daniel stopped asking how her day had been. He stopped noticing when she was exhausted. Eventually, Elena uncovered the truth. There was another woman, a confident younger woman named Vanessa, who had become a regular presence at Daniel's business functions. Elena found photographs of them together and messages that left no room for doubt or denial. Her heart shattered, but she did not cause a scene. She simply asked Daniel one direct question, whether their marriage still held any meaning for him at all. Daniel could not bring himself to answer. That silence proved more devastating than any confession could have been. Elena remained in the mansion for one single reason, and that reason was Daniel's grandmother, Margaret. The elderly woman had always treated Elena like a granddaughter rather than a simple in-law. While everyone else praised Daniel's achievements, Margaret remembered exactly who had stood beside him when he had nothing. She noticed Elena's sadness long before anyone else did. But Margaret had recently been recovering from a serious illness, and Elena refused to abandon her. Every morning, Elena brought her breakfast, helped organize her medications, and sat beside her whenever she felt lonely. Then came the family dinner that changed everything. Daniel had invited relatives and several important business associates to the mansion. Elena spent the afternoon helping the staff prepare the dining room. She arranged fresh flowers, checked every table setting, and made certain that Margaret's favorite dishes were ready. She still held onto a sliver of hope that perhaps Daniel would finally speak to her with honesty. Instead, when the guests arrived, Vanessa walked through the front doors wearing an elegant dress and carrying herself as though she already belonged to the family. Elena's stomach tightened with a familiar pain. Daniel greeted Vanessa without a trace of embarrassment. He introduced her to several guests as someone who had been assisting with the company. Nobody truly believed that excuse, but nobody challenged him either. Elena quietly stepped aside. She had learned that humiliation often becomes worse when you fight against it in front of strangers. When dinner was announced, everyone began moving to their seats. Elena approached the chair beside Daniel, the place she had occupied for 6 years. Before she could sit down, Vanessa walked over, pulled the chair out, and sat in it herself. The room fell into an excruciating quiet. Vanessa looked at Elena and offered a small, calculated smile. Then she casually reached for her glass as if nothing unusual had occurred. Daniel glanced toward Elena, but said absolutely nothing. His silence told her everything she needed to know. For a moment, Elena felt as though the entire mansion had vanished from beneath her feet. She looked at the chair where she had once celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and Daniel's greatest victories. She remembered sitting there when they had received their very first major business contract. She remembered Daniel holding her hand beneath the table because he was nervous. She remembered all those nights she had believed they were building a future together. Now another woman occupied her place. Elena lowered her eyes and turned to walk away. That was when Margaret's chair scraped loudly against the floor. The elderly woman stood with surprising strength, her face pale but her eyes sharp and focused. Everyone turned toward her. Margaret looked directly at Vanessa and pointed firmly toward the chair. "Get up." Vanessa's smile disappeared instantly. Margaret's voice rang out and shook the entire dining room. She reminded everyone that the chair was never simply a piece of furniture. It represented the woman who had stood beside Daniel when he had absolutely nothing. It belonged to the person who had sacrificed quietly without ever demanding applause. Then Margaret turned toward Daniel and asked him where he had been when Elena worked nights to help build his company. Where was Vanessa when Elena sold her jewelry to help cover the company's early expenses? Where was Vanessa when Daniel's first major deal collapsed and he came home convinced he was a failure? Elena had been present through every single one of those moments. Daniel's face changed. He had forgotten, not because the memories had disappeared, but because success had made him far too comfortable to recall them. Vanessa finally stood, her composure crumbling, but Margaret was not finished. She told Daniel that wealth could buy a bigger house, expensive cars, and impressive dinners, but it could never buy back a person's dignity after they had destroyed it. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She expected Daniel to defend himself, to offer some excuse. Instead, he walked toward her and admitted that he had been selfish. He said he had confused success with happiness and attention with genuine love. He apologized, but Elena did not offer immediate forgiveness. She told him something that everyone in that room needed to hear. Forgiveness was not the same as forgetting. She had spent years giving pieces of herself away in order to protect their marriage. She was not going to spend the rest of her life proving that she deserved respect. Daniel finally understood that the woman standing before him was not the quiet, dutiful wife he had taken for granted. She was the very person who had helped build the life he was now recklessly risking. The next morning, Elena packed a small suitcase and left the mansion, not because Margaret had told her to, and not because Daniel had demanded it, but because she finally understood that choosing herself was not an act of cruelty. Months passed. Daniel began therapy, stepped away from the company for a while, and started the long process of rebuilding the trust he had destroyed. He did not expect Elena to return quickly. Instead, he learned to respect her boundaries. Margaret remained close to Elena and encouraged her to build a life that truly belonged to her. Eventually, Elena started her own small foundation aimed at helping women who had sacrificed their careers and dreams for their families. Daniel supported that foundation without asking for anything in return. 1 year later, Elena returned to the mansion for Margaret's birthday. The dining room looked almost exactly the same. The flowers were arranged beautifully. The table was covered with fine dishes. And there in its usual place stood the same chair. Daniel stood beside it. But this time he did not pull it out for Vanessa. He pulled it out for Elena, and then he stepped back. Elena looked at Margaret, and the old woman smiled warmly. Elena sat down not because she was reclaiming a seat, but because she had finally realized something far more important. Her worth had never come from a chair. It had never come from a husband. It had never come from a mansion. Her worth had been there all along, quietly waiting for her to recognize it. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who quietly endure until they finally gather the courage to choose themselves. And before you go, comment "I choose dignity" if you believe that everyone deserves respect, loyalty, and a second chance, but never at the expense of their self-worth. Because sometimes the most powerful moment in a person's life is not when someone finally chooses them. It is when they finally choose themselves.